Wu slipped through the classroom door 15 minutes late. The lecture hall was massive, designed to accommodate species of all shapes and sizes. Rows of seats curved upward in a semicircle, and at the center stood instructor as, a towering with scales that gleamed like polished copper under the artificial lights. The instructor's 4 eyes tracked Wu's entrance but said nothing. A small mercy. The human student made his way to an empty seat in the middle section, trying to ignore the stares from the alien students around him. Most of them had never seen a human up close before. Earth had only joined the Galactic Consortium 40 years ago, and humans were still considered newcomers. Worse than that, they were considered weak. As I was saying, as continued, his voice resonating through the hall, the plasma whip requires not only strength but absolute control. One mistake and you will burn yourself beyond recovery. At the front of the class, a young stood holding the weapon in question. Was the instructor's prize student, known throughout the academy for his combat skills. He held the plasma whip with casual confidence, the weapon's handle gleaming in his upper right hand. With a flick of his wrist, the whip activated. A cord of contained plasma extended from the handle, glowing bright orange and radiating heat that Wu could feel even from his seat. The technique is simple for those with proper strength, announced, his voice carrying a sharp edge of arrogance. He glanced toward the human section of the class. Though I suppose some species might find it challenging. A few alien students laughed. Wu kept his expression neutral. He had heard worse during his 2 months at the academy. Demonstrated a series of strikes, the plasma whip cracking through the air with sharp snaps that made several students flinch. The movements were flashy, impressive to look at, but Wu noticed something. The grip shifted too much during the wind-up. His stance was too wide. Against a real opponent, those mistakes would be fatal. Question, Wu said, raising his hand. The room went quiet, as his 4 eyes focused on him. Yes, Cadet Wu. That stance, Wu gestured toward. It leaves your center exposed, and the grip shift during the wind-up telegraphs your strike. Anyone trained would see it coming. The silence in the room changed quality. Now it was the quiet before a storm. Scales darkened slightly, a sign of anger in. You dare critique my form, human. I have trained with the plasma whip since I was a juvenile. How long have your people even known such weapons existed? About 40 years, Wu admitted. But a flaw is a flaw, regardless of who points it out. The second set of arms flexed. Perhaps you would like to demonstrate proper technique then, since you clearly know better than those who have mastered this weapon for generations. Wu opened his mouth to respond, but as held up one clawed hand. Cadet Wu raised a legitimate tactical question. There is no need for. No, instructor, interrupted, something few students would dare to do. I insist. Let the human show us how superior Earth training must be. He extended the plasma whip toward Wu, the glowing cord still active. Come, demonstrate. Wu stayed in his seat. He had no intention of making this situation worse. Taking the whip would either end with him burning himself and proving his point, or succeeding and making a permanent enemy. Neither option appealed to him. I'm not saying I could do better, Wu said carefully. I'm saying the technique has a flaw. Coward, hissed. He cracked the whip in Wu's direction, the plasma cord snapping through the air close enough that the human felt the wave of heat wash over his face. Several students gasped. Using an active weapon against another student, even as intimidation, violated academy rules. Wu didn't flinch. He had grown up in Seoul's underground fighting circuits before joining the military, and later the academy. A hot whip crack was nothing compared to some of the things he had faced in dark alleys and unauthorized fight clubs. But he also didn't move. He just stared at with calm, dark eyes. That's enough. The voice came from the back of the lecture hall. Everyone turned. A young woman stood up from the teaching assistant section in the highest row. She was human, with short black hair and a pleasant smile that somehow made her more intimidating rather than less. She wore the academy uniform with a third-year cadet insignia and a teaching assistant badge. Began walking down the steps with measured, unhurried movements. Every human student in the class relaxed visibly. The aliens looked confused by this reaction. Said pleasantly, "That's academy property you're waving around. Instructor as may I." The old watched her approach with what might have been amusement in his 4 eyes. "Proceed, teaching assistant." Scales rippled with irritation. "This doesn't concern you, human." "Actually, it does. As TA, I'm responsible for equipment safety." She reached the bottom of the steps and extended her hand. "May I see the whip, please?" The stared at her for a long moment. Then, with a condescending smile, he placed the handle in her palm. "By all means, show us how humans handle weapons designed for real warriors." Examined the whip with professional interest. The plasma cord still glowed orange, radiating enough heat to distort the air around it. Most species required specialized heat-resistant gloves just to hold an active plasma whip for more than a few seconds. "You know," said conversationally, "the plasma whip was actually inspired by an Earth weapon. We called them just whips back home, used them for thousands of years. Different purpose, similar principle." She pressed something on the handle, the safety limiters. Wu recognized the action immediately. The plasma cord's glow intensified from orange to white-blue. "Of course, our version didn't burn quite this hot," continued. Then, before anyone could react, she wrapped the active plasma whip around her bare forearm. The lecture hall erupted in shouts. Several alien students jumped from their seats, as took a step forward, then stopped. His expression remained pleasant and calm. The smell of burning flesh began to fill the air. Her skin reddened, then blistered where the plasma made contact. Second-degree burns forming in real time. She didn't even wince. "The trick," she said, her voice steady, "is understanding that pain is just information. Your body telling you something is wrong. On Earth, we learn to acknowledge that information and then decide what to do about it." She unwrapped the whip from her arm with smooth, controlled movements. The burned skin glistened, but she held her arm steady. "In this case, I decided it wasn't that important." Stared at her, his earlier arrogance completely gone. Wu leaned back in his seat with the faintest smile. He muttered under his breath, just loud enough for the human student next to him to hear, "Poor bastard has no idea what he just started." Twirled the plasma whip experimentally, testing its weight and balance. "Now then, you wanted a demonstration. Let me show you how this weapon is properly used." The silence in the lecture hall was absolute. The plasma whip hummed in his hand, the white-blue cord casting strange shadows across the lecture hall. Her burned forearm hung at her side, skin blistered and angry red, but her grip on the weapon remained rock-steady. She moved to the center of the demonstration area where had been standing moments before. "Step back, please," she said politely to the. He stumbled backward, his 4 arms held uncertainly at his sides. Instructor as moved to the edge of the room. His expression was unreadable, but he made no move to stop her. The old warrior wanted to see what would happen next. Rolled her shoulders, testing the weight of the whip. "The plasma whip is classified as an advanced weapon in consortium military doctrine," she began, her voice taking on a teaching tone. "Most species require 3 years of training before they're allowed to use one in combat situations. Do you know why?" No one answered. Every eye in the lecture hall was fixed on her. "Heat tolerance," she continued. "The weapon generates approximately 800 degrees Celsius when active. The handle has cooling systems, but the plasma cord itself radiates enough heat to cause burns through proximity alone. Extended use without proper protection causes nerve damage, tissue death, and eventual loss of limb function." She snapped the whip forward. The crack echoed through the hall like a gunshot. A practice target across the room, designed to withstand plasma fire, exploded into pieces. "But heat tolerance is only part of it," said. She began moving, the whip flowing around her in controlled arcs. The real difficulty is pain management, because no matter how much protection you wear, using this weapon hurts. The vibrations travel up your arm. The radiant heat bakes your skin. Your muscles cramp from the precise control needed. After 10 minutes of continuous use, most trained soldiers need medical attention. She demonstrated a defensive pattern, the plasma cord weaving a barrier of superheated energy in front of her. Then, in a movement too fast for most of the alien students to follow, she transitioned into an attack sequence. The whip lashed out 3 times in rapid succession, each strike hitting a different practice target with surgical precision. On Earth, we have a saying, continued, not even breathing hard. Pain is just weakness leaving the body. We also say, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Humans spent 200,000 years proving both of those wrong and right at the same time. Wu watched from his seat with professional interest. He had seen fight before during training exercises. She never showed off, never used more force than necessary. But when she decided to make a point, she made it thoroughly. A student in the front row, a crystalline being from Sector 9, raised a tentative appendage. Teaching assistant, how are you tolerating the pain? Smiled. Who said I'm not in pain? She held up her burned arm. The blisters had grown worse, and the skin around them was turning a worrying shade of purple. This hurts quite a lot, actually. Probably a 7 out of 10 on my personal pain scale. Then why? The student began. Because pain is temporary, interrupted gently, and this lesson is important. She turned to face directly. You wanted to know about human training. Let me tell you a story. She began a new series of movements with the whip, more complex than before. The weapon became an extension of her body, flowing through attack and defense patterns that seemed impossible for a weapon that burned to touch. I grew up near the Korean demilitarized zone, she said. That's a strip of land between 2 parts of Earth that have been in conflict for over 100 years. When I was 18, I joined the military. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. The whip cracked again, this time wrapping around a reinforced steel bar that was part of the room's architecture. Pulled, testing the tension. Then she used it to swing herself up and over a practice barrier, releasing the whip mid-arc and landing in a combat crouch. They sent me to places where people were dying, she continued. Not training simulations, real combat, real bullets, real blood. I saw friends get shot. I got shot myself twice. The first time in the shoulder during a peacekeeping operation in East Africa. The second time in the leg during an extraction mission in Central Asia. She stood and resumed her demonstration, the whip dancing through the air. The second time I got shot, I was leading a team to rescue hostages from a militant group. The bullet shattered my femur. Do you know what a femur is? The strongest bone in the human body. Took 3 surgeries to fix it. A student, not but one of his friends, spoke up. You should have withdrawn, called for evacuation. The hostages would have died, said simply. So I finished the mission first, walked on a shattered leg for 3 hours, got the hostages to safety, and then allowed myself to be evacuated to medical. She paused in her movements, the whip hanging loose in her hand. The doctors said I would never walk properly again. Took me 8 months to prove them wrong. The lecture hall was completely silent now, even as seemed affected by the story. That's the difference, said softly. Not that humans don't feel pain, we do. Not that we're stronger than other species, we're not. The difference is that Earth taught us to keep going anyway. Our planet tried to kill us with ice ages, predators, diseases, natural disasters. It threw everything at us and we just didn't die. She snapped the whip one final time, the crack echoing through the room. Then, with deliberate slowness, she wrapped it around her burned arm again. Fresh blisters formed instantly. The smell of cooking flesh intensified. Students in the front row turned away. His pleasant expression never changed. This level of pain would hospitalize most consortium species. For humans, it's annoying, distracting, but manageable. She unwrapped the whip and deactivated it, the glowing cord vanishing back into the handle. We don't enjoy pain, we don't seek it out, but we learn to function through it because on Earth, if you let pain stop you, you died. She walked over to and held out the whip, took it with trembling hands. Your form was sloppy, said, her voice gentle but firm. The whip is a precision instrument, not a threat display. You were trying to intimidate, not preparing to fight. In a real combat situation, that would get you killed. She gestured to the practice targets she had destroyed. Try again. This time, imagine your life depends on every strike. Stared at the weapon in his hands, then its burned arm, then back at the weapon. His scales had lost their dark, angry color and faded to a pale, almost white shade. Fear. Wu's neighbor, another human student named, leaned over and whispered, "She's terrifying when she wants to be." "You should have seen her during survival training last year," Wu whispered back. "She went 4 days without food or water in the desert simulation and still won the combat evaluation at the end." Turned to address the entire class. Instructor as teaches that the plasma whip requires strength and control. He's right, but he's missing the third requirement. She held up her damaged arm. Commitment. You have to be willing to accept the consequences of using this weapon. The pain, the burns, the permanent damage. If you're not committed, you'll hesitate, and hesitation kills. She bowed slightly to as a gesture of respect. "My apologies for interrupting your class, instructor. I believe the point has been made." The old scales rippled in what Wu had learned to recognize as amusement. "Indeed it has, teaching assistant. Indeed it has." He turned to the class. "What has demonstrated today is why the consortium invited Earth to join our academy. Not because humans are superior warriors, but because you understand aspects of combat that we have forgotten in our 800 years of peace." Walked back toward the teaching assistant section, her burned arm hanging loosely. As she passed Wu's row, she caught his eye and gave him the smallest of winks. The entire class of alien students watched her go in stunned, respectful silence. By the next morning, everyone on Station Apex 7 had heard about the plasma whip incident. Wu discovered this when he entered the cafeteria for breakfast and found himself the subject of intense stares from every alien student in the room. The whispers followed him to the food dispensers and back to his table. "Is it true she wrapped it around her arm twice? I heard she didn't even go to medical afterward. My said humans feel pain differently than us." "No, they feel it the same, they just don't care." Wu sat down with his tray and tried to ignore the attention. Across from him was grinning. "You're famous by association now." "I didn't do anything," Wu muttered. "You were there, close enough. Bit into something that looked like purple fruit but smelled like bread. Got called to the commandant's office, you know." Wu looked up sharply. "When?" "An hour ago. Formal inquiry about the demonstration." His grin faded. "Some instructors think she went too far." That worried Wu more than he wanted to admit. Had essentially mutilated herself in front of a class to make a point. In consortium culture, where most species avoided pain at all costs, her actions might be seen as disturbing rather than impressive. The cafeteria doors opened and entered. The paused when he spotted Wu, then, to everyone's surprise, walked directly to the human's table. "May I sit?" asked stiffly. Wu gestured to an empty seat. "It's a public table." The sat, his 4 arms folding in a gesture that indicated uncertainty. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, "I spoke with my family last night, told them what happened." And Wu kept his voice neutral. "My father is a military historian. He looked up Earth's combat records." Scales shifted through several colors. "I had no idea. The wars, the casualties, the conditions your soldiers fought in, it's," he struggled for words, "it's beyond what we considered possible." Snorted, "Most of it's publicly available information. You just never bothered to look." "Why would we?" His voice held no arrogance now, only genuine confusion. The consortium has been at peace for 800 years. We study historical conflicts as academic exercises, not practical knowledge. When Earth applied to join the Academy, we assumed your people would be like any other species. Perhaps physically weaker due to your lower gravity, but otherwise similar. We are similar, Wu said. We just come from a different kind of world. No, shook his head, a gesture he had learned from watching humans. You're not. My father showed me footage from Earth's military archives. Soldiers fighting in temperatures that would kill most species within minutes. Medics treating wounded while under fire. Entire units holding positions against impossible odds because surrender wasn't an option. He looked directly at Wu. You come from a world that wants you dead, all of you, and somehow that made you stronger instead of wiping you out. Before Wu could respond, another human student approached the table. Was a second-year engineering student with sharp eyes and oil-stained hands. Wu, you need to see this. She held out her. On the screen was a message from the Academy Commandant's office, sent to all students. A new training program was being implemented, effective immediately. Human students would be integrated into advanced combat courses as assistant instructors, teaching adverse condition warfare tactics. They're making it official, said. Humans as specialized instructors. Whistled. That's either really good or really bad for us. Both, Wu said quietly. The message meant the Academy recognized human capabilities, but it also meant increased scrutiny. They would be expected to perform, to prove that demonstration wasn't a fluke. Across the cafeteria, the doors opened again. This time it was. Her arm was wrapped in regenerative bandages, but otherwise she looked completely normal. She walked to the food dispensers with her usual pleasant expression, seemingly unaware of the complete silence that had fallen over the room. Every alien student watched her, some with awe, some with fear, many with a mixture of both. Collected her food and scanned the cafeteria. When she spotted Wu's table, she headed over, actually flinched when she approached. Mind if I join you? She asked. Please, Wu said, moving his tray to make room. Sat and began eating, completely casual. After a moment she noticed everyone staring. Something on my face. They want to know what happened with the commandant, said. Oh, that. Took a sip of water. Nothing much. Formal inquiry about safety protocols and whether I violated Academy regulations by removing the safety limiters on Academy equipment. And pressed. And the Commandant decided that since I'm qualified as a weapons instructor and the demonstration was conducted in a controlled environment with medical facilities nearby, no rules were actually broken. She smiled. Though I did get a very stern lecture about setting proper examples for younger students. Spoke up hesitantly. I wish to apologize for yesterday. My behavior was inappropriate and dangerous. Looked at him with genuine warmth. Apology accepted, and I should apologize too. I could have made my point without being quite so dramatic. No, the said firmly. You needed to be dramatic, otherwise I wouldn't have believed it. None of us would have. He gestured around the cafeteria. We have spent our entire lives in a society where pain is avoided, where conflict is resolved through negotiation, where the idea of fighting through injury is considered primitive. We needed to see that there's another way. It's not a better way, said quietly. Just a different one. Earth's way came from necessity, not choice. If we could have built our civilization without war and suffering, we would have. Wu watched the exchange with interest. This was the side of that most people didn't see, the thoughtful philosophy student who had joined the military not out of aggression, but out of a desire to protect others. The Commandant said something to me, continued. He said humanity is either the consortium's greatest hope or its worst nightmare. He asked me to help him determine which. What did you tell him? Asked. That it depends on what the consortium needs us to be. Looked down at her bandaged arm. If you need warriors who can fight in conditions that seem impossible, we can do that. If you need soldiers who won't break under pressure, we can do that too. But if you need conquerors, if you need people who enjoy violence for its own sake, you're asking the wrong species." She looked around the table, meeting each person's eyes. "Most humans join the military because we want to prevent war, not cause it. We know what war costs better than species who have lived in peace for centuries. We've counted the bodies, buried our friends, lived with the nightmares. We don't want that for anyone else." The cafeteria had gone completely quiet. Alien students at nearby tables were clearly listening. "So when people look at me and see someone who can wrap a plasma whip around her arm without flinching," said, her voice carrying through the room, "I want them to understand something. I didn't learn to tolerate pain because I'm brave or special. I learned it because on Earth, if you couldn't function through pain, you didn't survive. That's not heroism. That's just evolution." She stood up, collecting her tray. "The Commandant wants to meet with all human students this afternoon to discuss the new training program. Room 447, 1400 hours. Don't be late." As she walked away, Wu noticed that the alien students' expressions had changed. The fear was still there, but now it was mixed with something else. Understanding, maybe, or at least the beginning of it. "Stood as well. I should go, I have research to do." He paused. "Wu, would you be willing to train with me sometime? I want to learn how humans approach combat tactics." Wu considered this. The who had been his antagonist yesterday was now asking to learn from him. "Sure, tomorrow morning, training room 6. I'll be there." Left, his posture more humble than Wu had ever seen it. Leaned back in his chair. "Well, this is going to be interesting." "That's one word for it," muttered. Wu said nothing. He was thinking about the Commandant's words, about humanity being either the greatest hope or worst nightmare. The responsibility of that choice felt heavy. Every action they took now would influence how the entire consortium viewed Earth and its people. No pressure at all. 3 weeks passed. The academy settled into a new rhythm, one where human students were no longer invisible curiosities but active participants in advanced training. Wu found himself spending more time with than he had expected. Though was genuinely interested in learning, not just about combat techniques, but about the thinking behind them. "On my world," explained one morning during training, "combat is about dominance displays. You show your strength, your opponent backs down, conflict is resolved. The idea of actually fighting to injury or death is considered barbaric." Wu adjusted his stance, demonstrating a defensive position. "And if your opponent doesn't back down, then you fight, but the goal is still to establish dominance without serious harm. First blood, submission, clear superiority." The mimicked Wu's stance with his multiple arms. "Your people fight differently." "We fight to win," Wu said simply. Because in Earth's history, losing often meant death, not just for the soldier but for everyone they were protecting. Before could respond, the training room's announcement system activated. "Instructor," as his voice filled the space. "All students report to Assembly Hall immediately. This is not a drill." The walk to Assembly Hall was filled with speculation. Emergency announcements were rare. When Wu arrived, he found hundreds of students already gathered. The human contingent clustered near the back, about 40 students total out of the Academy's 2,000. Instructor as stood at the front with several other senior instructors. "Students, we are implementing a new practical examination, effective immediately. The Great Devastation Simulation." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Wu had heard of this simulation. It was considered the Academy's most difficult test, designed to be impossible to fully complete. The goal was to teach students about tactical retreat and survival when victory wasn't possible. "You will be assigned to random mixed-species teams of 6, as continued. Your objective is to survive a historical recreation of the worst battle from the Great Devastation War. The simulation will last 48 hours. Teams that successfully evacuate with minimal casualties will receive passing marks. Teams that attempt unnecessary heroics will fail." Wu felt a stirring of unease. The way as emphasized unnecessary heroics, while looking directly at the human section wasn't subtle. Team assignments are now on your as finished. You have 2 hours to meet your team and prepare. Dismissed. Wu checked his, Team 7. His teammates were, and 2 aliens he didn't know well, a winged species from a low-gravity world, and a heavily armored being who communicated through a translation device. They gathered in one of the preparation rooms, immediately pulled up the simulation parameters on a shared display. Okay, this is bad. We're defending a civilian evacuation point against overwhelming enemy forces. Historical records show that the real battle lasted 6 hours before the defenders were wiped out. So we evacuate early, said, her wings ruffling nervously. Get the civilians out and withdraw before the enemy overwhelms our position. That's the expected approach, said. He was studying the terrain map with the intensity of someone who had done this before. But look at the evacuation route. Single narrow canyon, perfect ambush point. If we retreat with the civilians, we'll be even more vulnerable. Scales darkened thoughtfully. What are you suggesting? Glanced at Wu and the 3 humans seemed to have a silent conversation. Then Wu spoke. We're suggesting that the historical defenders lost because they used consortium tactics, defensive positions, measured response, evacuation when the situation became untenable. What other tactics are there? Translated voice asked. Earth tactics, said. She pulled up historical Earth military records on the display. Battle of Thermopylae, Siege of Bostonia, Defense of Stalingrad, situations where retreat wasn't an option and victory seemed impossible. Humans have a long history of holding positions that should have fallen. Looked skeptical. Those battles were real. This is a simulation designed to teach us about knowing when to retreat. Right, Wu said. It's designed to teach retreat, which means the instructors expect every team to evacuate early. What if we don't? The simulation began 2 hours later. Team 7 materialized in a fortified position overlooking a valley. In the distance, they could see civilian transports preparing to evacuate. On the opposite ridge, enemy forces were gathering. The simulation AI controlled the enemy, and according to the parameters, those forces would attack in waves of increasing strength. Most teams, Wu knew, would hold for the first wave or 2, then evacuate with the civilians. Safe, sensible, and exactly what the instructors expected. What can you work with? Wu asked. The engineer was already examining their fortification. Basic barrier walls, 3 automated defense turrets, limited ammunition, standard defensive setup. She moved to a pile of damaged equipment outside the barriers. But there's wreckage here from previous battles. I can repurpose some of it. Do it. You're on the turrets. You're with me on the ground defense. You're mobile support and medic. Wings fluttered in agitation. We should be planning our evacuation route. We're not evacuating, Wu said calmly. That's suicide. No, it's tactical defense. There's a difference. Wu pointed to the valley. Those civilians need time to evacuate safely. The simulation expects us to leave with them after 1 or 2 enemy waves. That leaves the evacuation route vulnerable to pursuit. Instead, we hold here, eliminate as many enemy forces as possible, and make sure those civilians get out safely. The enemy forces are infinite, protested. The simulation generates new waves until we retreat or die. Then we'll find out how many waves it takes to kill us, said cheerfully. He was already setting up a triage area behind the main barriers. The first enemy wave came 20 minutes later. Simulated soldiers, recreations of the devastating forces from the Great Devastation War. They were fast, heavily armed, and coordinated. Exactly the kind of enemy that was supposed to make defenders retreat. Team 7 opened fire. The automated turrets, supplemented by sense marksmanship, tore into the advancing enemy. Wu and held the ground positions, using barriers and terrain to their advantage. The wave broke against their defense. Not a single enemy reached their position. "First wave down," reported. She had rigged 2 of the turrets to have overlapping fields of fire. "Enemy casualties at 100%, our casualties 0. Civilian evacuation at 15% complete." "They'll send a bigger wave," said. "Good," Wu replied. "More targets." The second wave was indeed larger, nearly 3 times the size. It also included heavy assault units that the first wave had lacked. This time, the fighting was harder. One of the turrets was destroyed. Took a glancing hit that would have killed her in reality, but only registered as a severe injury in the simulation. Dragged her to the triage area. "You'll live, but you're off the turret." "I can still shoot," insisted, her wing damaged but her hands steady. "Then grab a rifle and find a firing position," said. On Earth, medics expected their patients to keep fighting if they could. It was apparently a shocking concept here. The second wave fell. Team 7 had taken casualties but held their position. Third wave, fourth wave, fifth wave, each one larger and more sophisticated than the last, kept repairing equipment with salvaged parts. Heavy armor absorbed hits that would have killed lighter species. Discovered that his 4 arms made him excellent at managing multiple weapons simultaneously. By the 8th wave, they were all injured. Wu had 3 simulated broken ribs, was fighting with 1 arm essentially useless. Himself had been hit and was treating his own injuries between stabilizing others. But the civilian evacuation was at 90% complete. "This is insane," said, reloading her rifle with shaking hands. "We should have retreated 6 waves ago." "Probably," Wu admitted. Blood from a head wound obscured half his vision. "But those civilians would be dead now if we had." The 9th wave came. This one included siege weapons. The barriers began to crumble. Improvised defenses were falling apart. They were out of ammunition for the remaining turret. "Fall back to secondary positions," Wu ordered. They retreated 20 meters to a defensive ring. Less space to cover, but also less room to maneuver. The enemy pressed forward, sensing weakness. Was fighting with 2 rifles and 2 blades, all 4 arms moving in a deadly dance. Stood like a wall, absorbing fire that would have torn through the others. Through improvised explosives made from power cells. "Civilian evacuation complete," shouted over the weapon's fire. "We did it." "Then we can retreat?" asked desperately. Wu looked at the battlefield. Enemy forces were still pouring in. Wave 10 beginning even as Wave 9 was being repulsed. "No," he said. "If we retreat now, they'll pursue the civilians. We hold until the evacuation ships are beyond pursuit range. That's another 20 minutes. Then we hold for 20 minutes." They held. Somehow, impossibly, they held. When the simulation finally ended, Team 7 was battered, bloody, and completely surrounded. But the civilians had escaped safely, and the enemy forces had taken catastrophic losses trying to overrun their position. The simulation dissolved, returning them to the Academy's training facility. All 6 team members collapsed to the floor, breathing hard despite knowing it had only been a simulation. Around them, instructors stood in shocked silence. On the displays, simulation statistics scrolled past. 10 waves defeated. 0 civilian casualties. Defensive position held for the entire 48 simulation hours. Objectives that were supposed to be unreachable, that were designed to teach the futility of last stands, all completed. Instructor as approached slowly. He looked at Team 7, then at the statistics, then back at Team 7. When he finally spoke, his voice held something that might have been awe. "How?" Wu pulled himself to his feet, his simulated injuries fading now that the program had ended. "You taught us that the simulation was impossible. You expected us to retreat. But on Earth, we learned that impossible just means nobody's succeeded yet. so we decided to try anyway. The Academy Council chamber was a place few students ever saw. Circular, with seats arranged in ascending tiers, it was designed for the most serious discussions about Academy policy and future. Wu had never expected to be standing at its center, with beside him and the entire faculty council looking down at them. Commandant presided from the highest seat. The ancient being belonged to one of the consortium's founding species, and had seen 8 centuries of peace. His translucent form flickered with colors that Wu had learned indicated deep thought. The simulation results from Team 7 have caused considerable debate among our faculty, the Commandant began. Some believe your performance demonstrates exactly what we hope to teach by admitting human students. Others believe it demonstrates why humanity should never have been allowed into the academy at all. Wu kept his expression neutral. Beside him stood relaxed but alert. Instructor, as the Commandant continued, would you share your perspective? The instructor stood. I designed the Great Devastation simulation to teach an essential lesson, that sometimes retreat is the only logical option, that sacrifice without purpose is waste, not heroism. Team 7 ignored this lesson completely, and instead demonstrated that with sufficient determination and creative tactics, positions we considered indefensible can be held. Is that problematic? Another instructor asked. I don't know, as admitted. Because in doing so, they also saved every simulated civilian and inflicted losses on the enemy that no other team has ever achieved. They succeeded by refusing to accept the parameters we established as absolute. That is either brilliant or dangerously reckless. A slim, elegant being from the philosophy department spoke up. The question before us is fundamental. Are we training our students to accept the galaxy as it is, or to change it? For 800 years, we have had peace because we learned the cost of war. We taught conflict avoidance, de-escalation, and strategic retreat. Then humanity arrives, and suddenly students are learning that sometimes you don't retreat. Sometimes you stand and fight regardless of the cost. Not regardless of the cost, said quietly. Every eye turned to her. May I speak? The Commandant gestured permission. You think we don't understand cost? His voice was gentle but firm. Earth has been at war with itself for most of recorded history. We've counted our dead in the millions. We've buried entire cities. We've seen what happens when violence becomes the first solution instead of the last resort. We know the cost better than any species here. She stepped forward, addressing the entire council. The difference isn't that we love war. It's that we understand when fighting is necessary. The simulation presented us with a choice. Retreat early and leave civilians vulnerable, or hold position and ensure their safe evacuation. We chose to hold. Not because we wanted to fight, but because those civilians deserved someone willing to protect them. An instructor from the tactical department leaned forward. But the simulation was designed to be unwinnable. You were supposed to learn that some battles can't be won. And we learned instead that unwinnable is subjective, Wu said. He had been quiet until now, but the question demanded an answer. Your simulation was based on historical tactics from the Great Devastation. We used different tactics. Earth tactics, guerrilla warfare, resource denial, improvised engineering, fighting through injuries that would make other species retreat. We changed the conditions of the battle. That's exactly what concerns us, another instructor said. This refusal to accept limitations, this willingness to fight through conditions that should stop you. Where does it end? The Commandant raised a hand for silence. Perhaps we should ask these students directly, why don't humans give up? Wu and exchanged glances. This was the question that really mattered, the one everything else built toward. May I tell you about Earth? Wu asked. The Commandant nodded. 200,000 years ago, our species nearly went extinct. Climate change, predators, disease. Our population dropped to less than 10,000 individuals. We should have died out completely, but we didn't. Wu's voice was steady. We survived the ice ages when we barely had fire. We fought predators that were stronger, faster, better armed than us. We spread across our entire planet despite deserts, mountains, oceans, and every natural barrier you can imagine. He gestured to the council. Every species here came from worlds that nurtured you. Stable climates, abundant resources, peaceful evolution. Earth tried to kill us constantly. Ice ages that lasted thousands of years. Volcanoes that blocked out the sun. Earthquakes, tsunamis, hurricanes, predators that hunted us. Diseases that wiped out entire populations. And we survived all of it. Not just survived, added. We thrived. We turned every challenge into an adaptation. Earth was cold. We invented fire and clothing. Predators were strong. We invented weapons and tactics. Food was scarce. We learned to hunt, farm, preserve, and trade. Earth threw everything at us and we threw it back. The council was silent, listening. That's why we don't give up, Wu said. It's not courage or stubbornness or some special quality. It's evolution. For 200,000 years, the humans who gave up died. The ones who kept trying survived and had children. We're descended from the ones who refused to quit. Took over. And when we developed civilization, we didn't stop facing challenges. We fought wars over resources, territory, ideology. We've had periods of terrible violence and destruction. But we also built societies, created art, developed science, explored our entire solar system. We learned that we could be better than our worst impulses. That's what you need to understand about humanity, Wu said to the council. We're not special because we're strong. We're not special because we tolerate pain or fight hard. We're special because we're adaptable. Earth made us that way. And when you invited us to join the consortium, you invited all of that history, all that adaptation, all that refusal to accept defeat. A long silence followed. Then the commandant spoke. And what happens when that adaptability, that refusal to accept defeat, encounters a threat that truly cannot be overcome? Then we adapt differently, said simply. Humanity has faced extinction-level threats before. Asteroid impacts, supervolcano eruptions, climate catastrophes. Sometimes we fight. Sometimes we evacuate. Sometimes we change our entire way of life to survive. The key word is survive. We find a way. Even if that way involves unacceptable losses, an instructor pressed. We try to minimize losses, Wu said. But yes, if the choice is between some casualties and total extinction, we choose survival. That might seem harsh to species who have lived in peace for centuries. But Earth taught us that sometimes there are no good choices, only less terrible ones. The commandant's form flickered through several colors. I asked you both here because in the weeks since the plasma whip incident, human students have changed the Academy's culture significantly. Students are questioning doctrines we've taught for generations. They're finding solutions to problems we considered unsolvable. They're demonstrating capabilities we thought impossible. Some faculty members find this inspiring. Others find it threatening. We're not trying to threaten anyone, said. We're just being ourselves. I know, and that's precisely the issue. The commandant seemed to come to a decision. The consortium has been at peace for 800 years. We achieved this peace through diplomacy, mutual understanding, and the collective decision that war was too costly to ever wage again. That peace has allowed our civilizations to flourish in ways that wouldn't have been possible during the Great Devastation. He paused, letting his words settle. But peace isn't the same as safety. There are threats in this galaxy that don't respond to diplomacy, cosmic phenomena that don't care about our treaties, and potentially hostile forces beyond our borders that we've simply been fortunate enough to avoid. For 8 centuries, we've prepared our students to maintain peace. We haven't prepared them for what happens if peace fails. And now you have humans who know how to fight when peace fails, Wu said, understanding. Yes, which brings me to the council's decision. The commandant addressed the entire chamber. We will establish a new department within the Academy, Advanced Threat Response. Human students will serve as primary instructors, teaching other species how to think tactically in worst-case scenarios, not to promote war but to prepare for its possibility. There were murmurs of approval and dissent from the council members. Additionally, the commandant continued, we are promoting teaching assistant to full instructor status, effective immediately. She will head the new department. Cadet Wu, you and select other human students will be given accelerated advancement to serve as assistant instructors. Bowed deeply. It would be an honor, Commandant. Don't thank me yet, said, and now his voice held a note of concern. Because there's something else you should know. 3 days ago, our deep space monitoring stations detected an anomaly at the edge of consortium space. A fleet of unknown origin moving toward our territory. We've attempted communication but received no response. The chamber went completely silent. It may be nothing, the commandant said. A previously unknown species or perhaps a misidentification, but it may also be something we haven't faced in 8 centuries, a real threat. Wu felt his pulse quicken. How long until they reach consortium space? At current speed, approximately 6 months. We're sending diplomatic vessels to make contact, but we're also preparing for the possibility that contact may not be peaceful. You want us to help prepare the consortium for war, said softly. I want you to help prepare the consortium to defend itself if necessary, the commandant corrected. Peace is our goal, but if these unknown forces prove hostile, we need to be ready. And after watching your people's performances over the past months, I believe you can teach us what we need to know. He looked at each council member. For 800 years, we've had peace because we all agreed that war was unacceptable. Humanity arrives from a world that never had that luxury, where war was a constant reality. I asked earlier whether your species is our greatest hope or our worst nightmare. I think I have my answer. The commandant's form shifted to a color Wu had learned indicated resolve. You're our hope, because if war comes to the consortium again, we'll need people who remember how to fight. Not because they want to, but because they know how to survive when fighting is the only option left. 2 years later, Wu stood in the academy's main assembly hall in his dress uniform. Around him, hundreds of students prepared for graduation. The past 2 years had transformed the academy. The Advanced Threat Response Department had trained thousands of students in tactics, survival, and combat readiness. The consortium's defensive capabilities had improved dramatically. And the unknown fleet. It had turned out to be refugees, fleeing from something they wouldn't discuss. The consortium had welcomed them, provided aid, and learned from them that there were indeed threats beyond their borders. Threats that didn't negotiate. Approached in her instructor's uniform, her rank insignia gleaming, ready for graduation. After everything we've been through, this is the easy part, Wu replied. She smiled, told me he's been assigned to frontier defense. He specifically requested a posting where he might see action. Good for him, he's become a hell of a fighter. So have they all. That's the thing about teaching people to survive, Wu. Once they understand what they're capable of, they stop accepting limitations. The graduation ceremony was impressive, full of tradition and honor. When Wu received his commission as a junior officer in the Consortium Defense Force, the entire human contingent erupted in cheers. Later at the celebration found them. They had become a friend truly over the past 2 years. I wanted to thank you both. Before I met you, I thought I was a warrior because I was strong. You taught me that real warriors are the ones who protect others, regardless of the cost to themselves. You learned that on your own, said warmly. We just gave you permission to try. As the celebration continued around them, Wu looked out the massive windows at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there were threats the consortium hadn't faced yet. Challenges that would test everything they had built. But he wasn't worried, because the galaxy now had something it hadn't had in 8 centuries, a generation trained not just for peace, but for survival, A generation that understood that the best way to maintain peace was to be ready to defend it. Joined him at the window. What are you thinking? That the commandant was right. We're not better than other species. We're just different. Earth made us different. And now we've made the consortium a little different too, observed. For better or worse. Wu smiled slightly. Definitely for better. The consortium needed to remember that peace has to be defended. That sometimes you have to stand your ground and fight, not because you want to, but because the alternative is worse. And what happens if that unknown threat comes back, the one the refugees won't talk about? Then the consortium will be ready, Wu said quietly, because we taught them what Earth taught us, that when you're faced with impossible odds, you don't give up. You adapt, you improvise, and you survive, no matter what it costs. In the reflection of the window, he could see the celebration behind them. Humans and aliens dancing together, laughing together, having forged bonds that would last lifetimes. They didn't know what challenges the future would bring, but they were ready to face them together. And that, Wu thought, was the real victory. Not that humans had changed the consortium, but that together they had become something stronger than either could be alone. The galaxy had no idea what they were actually capable of yet, but if the threats came, if the peace they had built was challenged, they would find out. And Wu had no doubt they would rise to meet whatever came. Because Earth had taught humanity to survive. And humanity had taught the consortium to fight. Together they would face the future, whatever it brought.